Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Stock Market Today, where we break down all the market action for today's session for Tuesday, January 28th. I'm Alexis Garcia, and here with me to give his expert market analysis is IBD News editor Ed Carson. So, Ed, indexes clawed back some losses today after a tech rout yesterday, but what a week, huh?
Yeah, it's what a week already. We're done, right? Uh,
This is where you say lemon, it's only Tuesday.
that's right. It is, and tons of news coming up this week. But yeah, I want to take a look at three stocks that were flashing buy signals today: Royal Caribbean, Axon Enterprise, and Shopify.
All right, well, we'll get to those names, but first, let's check in with the major indexes. Starting with the NASDAQ, that index gained 2.1% today, the S&P 500 up almost 1% today, and the Dow up about 0.3%. Small caps falling fractionally. So, Ed, let me get my charts up here. Let's take a deeper look at the NASDAQ here. And we see a nice gain today, retaking that 50-day line. But what are your thoughts with the action?
Yeah, it's the overall market. It's impressive how the market rebounded. I mean, the S&P and Nasdaq haven't regained all of their losses, but after Monday's drop, you might have thought we'd really start keep on falling, and there was a lot of paradigm shift things going on, filtering on the market that might make you think that we were into something. But yeah, bounce back. So now just have to see if that can continue to recover. Definitely shifts underneath the surface. We saw look like a lot of A stocks. Some AI losers from Monday bounce back somewhat. They still look damaged, but still help the indexes. And then you had some other AI software names like software come in. Outside of that, it was a relatively quiet day. Nvidia bounced back nicely, but a lot of others did not do as well. And Nvidia still that's had a big loss, and it's unclear. We'll just have to see how the news is, how that filters out. We don't really know how all the news that's been moving things is that really how that's really going to go. But software was really strong, and we'll go over that some more later. But a lot of other things were sort of mixed, which is fine after last week, after
Right.
Monday.
And as you mentioned, I think obviously the story is still very much developing. We're not really sure if this is going to be a long-term pivotal moment or just kind of a blip. We're relying on kind of the transparency and forthcoming of China on this. So there's a lot to figure out here. But just taking a look at the Spider S&P 500 ETF trust. Again, nice gain today, getting well above that 50-day line. But, a lot of the stocks that took a hit yesterday, those big tech stocks, the S&P 500, about, 30% of that index is just those 7 or 8 stocks. So what would you like to see develop here?
I mean, it's nice to see this action. You would like to see some of those big giants that are selling off gradually repair, but there's actually a lot of leadership out there that showed it was sort of impressive. You wouldn't know if you looked at the stocks breaking out, if you saw the indexes today, you wouldn't realize that there was such a damage on Monday. It is interesting. Investors shouldn't get too concentrated. That was, I think, it was an issue, is that it was easy to get too concentrated in AI because there were so many sectors that it seemed to have nothing to do with tech, and so you could tell yourself, "Oh, I'm not concentrated." And well, guess what? If you had heavy construction, if you had a cooling stock, if you had a utility, and you had Nvidia, it was not a good morning on Monday. So I think that just you'd be looking for things, and I think just having to be flexible. And we're coming into a ton of earnings. I mean, Wednesday is when it really kicks into gear. We have the Federal Reserve on Wednesday. That may be sort of a not that big of a deal, but still, it's out there. And I just think that investors have to be very much flexible in their mindset and ready to act on offense or defense in the short run.
That's right. There's a lot of news swirling out there. And I spoke to Steve Sosnick at Interactive Brokers this morning about the whole DeepSeek impact on AI stocks. And I think he echoed a lot of your point, Ed, where investors maybe just got a wake up call on how concentrated they actually are with having all their eggs in that AI basket. But I want to move over quickly to the Dow ETF, this one building the right side of that base here. What's your thoughts with the action?
I mean, that's coming up toward record highs. And actually, it was impressive given that there's NVIDIA and others. There's some big names in there that were selling off yesterday, but the Dow actually rose. And so it wasn't a huge gain today, but the Dow is probably leading among all the indexes for the week. It's nice. It's a sign of breadth, even though it's just 30 stocks. It shows you that uh, the damage wasn't as bad out of the Nasdaq on Monday.
And what are your thoughts on small caps here, Ed?
Still would like to, it didn't bounce back that much. And if, that's one thing is we would like to see some more breadth. And it did seem like a lot of non-tech groups weren't really rising today. It wasn't like they were terrible or anything. But yeah, that needs to get above the 50-day line. Now it's holding the 21-day line, so it certainly could. It's not falling apart. It's just waiting to see that.
All right, let's take a look at RSP just to get a gauge of more of that market breadth here. That one down about 0.5% today, Ed. But what are your thoughts here?
I mean, that's doing pretty well. They had a big run, and now it's holding above the 50-day line, which is nice. It's only a percentage point or two but it does feel a lot different. It's like just making the playoffs versus just missing. It really, the team may not be that much better, but it feels better. While it was down today, it really did, it was actually edging up yesterday.
All right, well, let's take a couple look at a couple sectors here, Ed, starting with SMH, that's the Vanex Semiconductor. And as we talked about, as this develops, looking at potential winners and losers, that taking a big hit yesterday with the sell-off, reversing higher today. But what are your thoughts with SMH?
That was a game changer. It probably usually when something like this happens, it's going to take a while. And I'm not saying it can't come right back or that the individual names can't come back, but it just seems like it's going to take a 2% gain after a 9% loss. This is still below the 200-day line, below all the moving averages. It needs a lot of repair work. It seems like.
Yeah, I think you've talked on IBD Live with the team, and when you see a break like this, just like you said, going to take some time to repair. But let's take a look at software because this one actually up today about 2.8%, but we're talking about a group that maybe could be potential winners here if this DeepSeek thing ends up being a thing for AI stocks, because you've got a lot of companies that maybe weren't planning a lot of spend anyway that could benefit from this.
Well, now they may even actually spend more because you can get so much more out of it. I mean, if it costs, it's just a matter. So many other things. It's like when the price comes down, people want more of it usually, unless it's assets. That's the one thing people don't want. But yeah, so there could be a real advantage if we see a real shift towards cheaper AI. A lot of software, and there were a lot of software makers that broke out, and others that did. And there's a lot of names on a lot of big earnings reports coming out, but this is actually above last Friday's high. So it recouped all of Monday's losses and the Monday and sort of the Friday's downside reversal. So, that was almost flashing a buy signal there. It's definitely a way you could have played software today, was buying IGV as it sort of made that move. So yeah, that does show you that sometimes, that there's definitely winners from this news.
All right, Ed. Well, let's take a look at some stocks now. You mentioned Royal Caribbean. This was the IBD stock of the day. This one up almost 12% on earnings. We see that blue dot breaking out of that 258.75 point.
Yeah, I think when it got above the 250 area, you could have bought it around there. You see that short-term high. So there was an opportunity to buy it a little earlier before it got above there. It wasn't a race, but it actually, it was pretty fast. It was definitely cruising along, but it wasn't there. Strong earnings. I think the revenue was just okay, but it was pretty strong outlook. And they also said, we're going to get into river cruises. And so that's interesting. You might want to just call up VIK, which ultimately I think did okay today, but VIK originally fell because that's a riverboat specialist. And yeah, look how that reversed higher. But there's that. So RCL, really showed that lifted the cruise group in general. Really powerful move here. Blue dot on the RS line. There's a lot to like here, with the growth that it still has, and the comparisons are getting tougher, but still showing pretty good growth here.
All right, let's take a look at Axon then, Ed. This one up about 5.4% today, retaking that 50-day line.
Yeah, it had a huge earnings move, and then it tried to do little things like, people, oh, is this a tight flag? Is that, and whatever. It didn't really hold. Now the market had issues, but now it formed a new base. It just took a break. It just took a break, and it was trying to get above the 50-day line for a couple of weeks. Couldn't get above it, but didn't fall apart. And today it did. Now volume wasn't great, and the volume hasn't been great on the way up on part of the right side of this base. So that is something to watch out for. But this is one that's been doing very well. Some nice acceleration in the latest quarter. So I think that investors could have taken an entry here today if they wanted to, but they had a lot of options today.
All right, let's move on to Shopify then, Ed. This one up almost 10% today. Again, another powerful move above this 50-day line and working that right side of the consolidation base with a 120.72 buy point.
Yeah, and actually, I think Leaderboard, which put this on, on Leaderboard, I think they were using this as a double bottom base, treating 115.37 as the actual buy point. You certainly could have used that as an early entry, and there's also a downward sloping trend line from the top of the base. So as it sort of got above the 50-day line decisively, that probably would have been the best place to buy it, obviously in hindsight, but that's a place where you could have bought it to try to get into it early. So that was strong action. As you can see, this had a big gap up on earnings, and yeah, it did go undercut that, but it held a lot of that, and so it just ultimately formed a base, and now it's moving up again. So you can see the volume is the strongest volume since that earnings surge that we saw last time. So that was impressive. Pick up in earnings and sales growth the last quarter. It looks like it's going to be pretty decent growth in 2025 as well, which is nice to see. Earnings aren't too far away, but seems like with a lot of that, and there's, Amazon earnings will be next week. We're going to get a lot of other earnings, which is something just in general that investors should be paying attention to, that could move the markets. But this one was really nice movement today.
All right, Ed. Well, thank you so much for your insights today. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more market analysis, starting with IBD Live. You can head on over to investors.com/IBD Live for all the details there. And we'll see you right back here tomorrow after the close.